Sab, welcome to this space. Thank you so much for being here again and wanting to share yourself, your story, and the huge value that you are providing to the world.
Thank you so much for having me, honestly, and just for letting me be a voice for so many people in my community. It honestly means the absolute world. So thank you for giving us the chance to do that.
So I'm curious about, already know something a little bit about your story, but can you please introduce yourself? Who are you and what brought you to this conversation that we're having now?
So I'm Sab. I am a survivor of childhood abuse. I come from a family of survivors. So my mom is also a survivor of many forms of abuse and many other women within my family and my circle. And um, I guess that was the foundation of what led me to what I do now. For the last 10 years, I've been supporting women survivors of abuse, specifically those from backgrounds like my own, ethnic minority backgrounds, because we don't always have services that understand us and are able to meet our needs. So that's kind of where I fell into. And that's led me to the work I do now, 10 years later, after working with survivors. I now work solely with professionals to help them be upskilled and ready to be the service that us survivors need. Because I think the topic of abuse is still very taboo, but people are starting to talk about it more and they're starting to reach out for support more. But if the support in place is not adequate for us, then we kind of hit another block. So it's trying to do what I can with my capacity and my knowledge and expertise to try and make those support services look a bit better for women who are like me.
Thank you. I honored you for not only, I acknowledge you for everything that you've been through, first of all, and I honor you for really being open to not only have this conversation, but for all your work that you are providing to women that have been through the same situation or similar situations that you have been through. And I'm curious about what led you to actually step into this role, the huge role that you are taking nowadays, one since last.
I think the honest truth is I saw my mom survive abuse. So my mom, bless her heart, experienced abuse since she was a child. She then got married and had two very abusive husbands, one of which was my father. So when she was experiencing domestic abuse from him, I was also experiencing childhood abuse from him. And I think that also kind of it linked us together in a way where we ended up going on this path where we kind of just became a bit of a magnet for women who were very vulnerable and stuck. So I remember throughout my childhood and throughout my teenage years, there's always being women somehow finding my mom and just needing that support and reaching out through communities or through neighbors. And I watched her support women. And I think that's what built the passion for me to then want to support women. And I went to university to originally become a police officer. That was my dream, thinking, I can, I guess, get justice from the inside. And whilst I was doing my degree, I ended up volunteering for a rape crisis center at 18 years old. And I felt like I found home. That was my place. That's where my calling was. And I found that through my journey there with them, so I was there for 6 years, and I ended up getting employed by them and I did numerous roles. And I kind of felt like it was my purpose being fulfilled. And I think that just that encouragement and that motivation to help others and just seeing the difference and the impact it had in women's lives kept me in that space for a very long time because I could truly see the difference that was being made. So I was quite lucky to be involved in not just supporting survivors, but also being able to do prevention work. So I did a lot of work in schools and universities, in community centers, religious places of worship, had these really difficult conversations. And I saw the difference that made. I saw that it gave people kind of a bit of a light bulb moment of we need to do more about these topics within our communities. So I think seeing my mum survive and seeing her not just survive but then thrive kind of pushed me to also become the same, but on my own journey and in my own way. I would definitely say she was the root of what made me want to do this type of work, and kind of just hoping that she had someone like that when she was going through it. That's something she always said to me when I used to come home and be like, "Oh, I've done this today, I've done that." She goes, "I wish we had someone like you when it was my time. We did it all by ourselves." So I think those kind of comments from her made me think, this is the space I need to be in, and this is something I need to be doing.
Thank you for sharing that, and I honor your mother as well for acknowledge her for everything that she's been through. And you mentioned she thrives as well, right? She's those two words that you mentioned, not only survived but thrive, right? And this is also, I feel that is the huge message to leave here to the audience that are watching, right? Is you can not only survive, but also go through all these really impactful and damaging situations and thrive in life as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that sometimes many survivors feel like this is it for us, but actually there is still a life outside of abuse, and it just takes a lot of healing and support. And you can get there, you can get to a point where life feels happy again. You're not just having to live in survival mode and get to the next day. You can enjoy life again. And you can definitely become that person who is happy with where they are and what they do, and even then help others who are still stuck in those places. So I think it's a very beautiful community when we look at survivors of abuse, because they understand each other in such a way where you don't even need to explain things, like even language isn't important. They just understand what each other have been through and they get it, and they just kind of help instantly because they know how it feels like to do things alone. And I think it's just such a beautiful community of people who just really care and support each other just because they want to see people do better, not to benefit themselves.
And what would you say, like, what would you like to share about your own journey before stepping into how you started and what you actually are offering to the people, to women who have been through similar situations? What would you like to mention about your personal story and how you started to walk this path of with the intention of thriving as well?
So myself, I experienced majority, to be honest, physical abuse from my father. So he was someone who was an alcoholic. He was also used a lot of substances, and he was just a character that was, I would like to describe as narcissistic. He didn't really think about others. He didn't really care for others, and he lives in this world where he's right and everyone else is incorrect. But he's also someone who will kind of make up stories to make it sound like things didn't happen, just to justify it in his own mind that everything was fine. So when my mum married him, she got pregnant with me straight away, and the abuse started before I was born. So he was very violent with her when I was still in her stomach. And then as soon as I was born, I was the firstborn, he had tendencies to get very irritated. So there were episodes where when I was a newborn, like I was 3 months old, and he would, at one occasion, hung me outside the window by my neck because he was just so angry and frustrated, and had a drink. There were occasions where he threw me out of a moving car, and he wouldn't let my mum get out. And my mum, as well as experiencing domestic abuse, she also has a disability. So mobility is very difficult for her. So he used that for his advantage when he was abusing me because he knew it obviously distressed her, but also there wasn't very much she can do in that moment physically because her condition just wouldn't allow her to. So he would do kind of awful things like that. He would there was one occasion where he'd kicked me under the sofa really badly, and it actually left me with a lifelong condition where I had problems with my stomach and digestion. And for years and years and years, I was on medication because of it, because he'd damaged internal organs. So he'd do very violent things, but he was also very nice as a father. So there was two sides of him. You know, he was very comforting and loving, and you know, he would kind of behave like I was his favorite. But then there was another dark side to him where he was incredibly abusive and just very nasty. And when he did eventually leave, he wasn't around for very long. It was a few years. And when he did eventually leave, my sister was born at the time. She was very young. She was about a month or two old. He'd left with a woman he'd been having an affair with, who also had two children of her own, two daughters who were a little bit older than us. And he disappeared and he never came back. And he put my mom through family court. So then we had to experience that. And I think the years to follow when he had left, it was the abandonment because he'd gone with a woman who had two other daughters. It was that feeling of, were we not good enough for you? Like, although you were abusive and you were nasty, you were also our father. And I think for my sister especially, there was this feeling of abandonment because she never got to experience him at all. She was too little. So I think for years I carried that feeling of shame of, I wasn't good enough, but they were good enough for you. I think my body remembered a lot of the abuse. So I was triggered by like confrontations, like even in schools, if someone was like having a bit of a kickoff, I'd withdraw and I'd get very terrified and I'd get really anxious and I'd have panic attacks. And I wouldn't understand why, but I think it was just my body's memory of knowing what happened previously in my life. And then as I got older, you know, I didn't want to form relationships with anybody. You know, there was that feeling of, I can't trust you. I isolated myself quite massively. And I think I just really struggled. I really struggled with my own emotions and being able to actually sort them. And as that was going on, my dad then turned up again, you know, many moons later, talking about at least 14 years later into our lives, wanting to now get me and my sister married off. So I was 16, my sister was 14, and he'd apparently had set proposals for us in our home country, which is Pakistan, to men who were in their 30s and 40s, thinking that he all of a sudden had a right because he was a father to marry us off. And my mum had none of it. She was like, not happening. So reported it, and the police put in forced marriage protection orders for us to keep us safe. And then again, he disappeared. And only a few years ago, we kind of touched base again when I was becoming a parent because I felt like I needed a bit of closure, answers, and then found out he was in prison for abuse. So he obviously never changed, and the pattern of abuse continued throughout of the other families that he ended up being with. But I think it is just it's quite sad, I think, for me to know that there's a person who was supposed to love me and protect me, treated me so badly, but also like the fact that I've now got a child. I'd never want my son to ask about him. I'd never know how I'd have that conversation. I'd never wanted to expose him to that level of trauma. So although he's physically gone, the essence of him is still very much there. And that in itself is very traumatizing. And I think a lot of people don't understand that when people experience abuse, just because an abuser is left, they may not necessarily still feel safe. And it's not so easy to just get over it. You know, that's something that just doesn't happen in abuse. You can't just get over it because, like, for me, my body remembered it. My mind might have not because I was so young, but my body still remembered certain things and I couldn't switch that off. I couldn't work that out. So it's not easy just to let go of things, and it's not easy to just move past them. And I think it's very difficult for people to understand them when they've not been in those positions. But when they speak to survivors, they do need to be mindful that, it's not an easy journey. It's a really difficult journey to be on. And there's very tough decisions you need to make. And just to be kind and don't be so judgmental and don't be so cruel. Like, those people have gone through enough and they don't need that from you. They just need your kindness. And if you don't understand, that's fine, but don't make them feel uncomfortable and upset. And don't make it their problem that you don't understand. That's something you need to work out for yourself. So I think that's really kind of my journey. And even though I'm 30 now, I still feel like there's a lot of healing I still need to do and work out. I don't think healing ever stops. I think being a parent of a little boy also is quite difficult because I don't ever want him to end up like my father. So that's kind of where I am personally, I guess. And that definitely fueled a lot of what I then went on to do professionally. Because I guess I got it. I understood. I understood what those women felt like. And I was blessed enough to have an opportunity to support them. So I took it.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. I thank you for all the women who are going to watch the video, this interview that we're having now, because I know that you are impacting many, many lives and you are still going to impact more and more. So I thank you for all the women from the bottom of my heart. So how did you start this process of managing all of this, right? Of the trauma that this created within you, right? So it's like the audience needs you so to leave like a drop, right, of of faith and also of guidance as well.
If I'm honest with you, I think a lot of it was seeing how my mother dealt with it. So my mum never went through any kind of specific healing. Like, she never went through to a therapist, as she never accessed support for her mental well-being through the doctors. And it always baffled me how she had such a strong mindset and how she kind of got through it. And I realized that a lot of it was down to her faith. And she had a very deep and strong connection to God. And she felt like she would always say to me, things would happen for a reason. And she'd always say to me, yeah, I had a horrible marriage, but if I didn't have a horrible marriage, I'd never have you two daughters and I'd never have you as a blessing. So she'd always kind of reframe things in a positive way. So although she experienced this horrific part of her life, she'd always say, well, something good came out of the end. And then when I was kind of growing up, I tried to do the same. And I kind of found that although I went through this awful trauma, it actually helped me, especially my teenage years, to help friends who'd also gone through trauma or were going through trauma because they could actually talk to somebody about it. There was the first time some of them even disclosed that they'd gone through something. And I think I used what my mum did and did that positive reframe of something negative turned into something that turned into a blessing, basically. And I kind of followed her path of having this strong connection to our Lord, of the fact that there's so many kind of techniques that are used in therapy, like grounding and breathing and movement. And so many of them are also written in our faith of, if you get angry, you get distressed, use these techniques to basically manage your emotions and manage your well-being, maybe change that frustration to something better, something more beneficial for you. So when I used to kind of, I guess, look at my faith, and then also the fact that I was working in a rape crisis center alongside these incredible counselors and looking at the types of things they were doing, I thought, you know what? Like, there's so much out there for me to use, and I don't have to, I think, change who I am or kind of alter my values, because what's being said in the medical field is also being said in my faith. And I kind of merged the two together and found something that worked for me. I do think things like grounding techniques, that, box breathing, being able to just move around if you're feeling quite, if you're feeling a certain way, and kind of letting your nervous system kind of have a bit of a reboot and a recharge. those things definitely do work when you're in the brink of maybe an anxiety attack or a panic attack. Um, but I think on a day to day, if I'm honest, what I kind of did for my own healing was keeping busy, which isn't, I don't think that's a very good thing to do, because sometimes you end up becoming too busy and then you become burnt out. And I think that's what my 20s was about. I was doing so many things, um, trying to help so many people, and my glass was always empty because I didn't give myself time. So I think it was just a lot of self-discovery really for me of, what is your priorities? What can you actually do, and what is best left to somebody else? And then I was very fortunate to get married to an incredible man, super supportive. And I think that gave me my faith back into relationships and into men, if I'm honest with you, that they are good men out there. They're tricky to find, but they are wonderful men out there who do care about you, who will love you, who will support you. And I think that was the icing on top of my healing cake, was having someone like that in my life who just cared, who just genuinely cared about my well-being, about my passions, just wanted me to be happy. And it took a long time. It took a long time to find him, but I did. And I think there's someone like that for everyone. It might not be a partner, it could be a friendship, it could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be just someone that you gel on and vibe with in such a good way. But you'll always find someone, or you will have someone in your life who is supportive. And I would just say to people, don't lose those, don't lose those supportive networks. You know, as they say, it takes a village to raise a kid. I feel like it takes a village to survive, honestly. I feel like you can't do that alone. So definitely look at the people around you. And if they're not making you happy and they're not making you feel good, then prioritize that as changing it and finding people who do, because it makes the world of difference.
Thanks. So you mentioned the fact of looking at your mom, that was inspiring. You mentioned the fact of the faith, the different tools, and you can merge your faith and the tools as well. And also the relationships, right? Again. So would you say that the first thing that would you recommend, if am I correct, is going to reach someone that you can feel that supported and cared to start this whole process, right?
I think, honestly, the most important thing for someone who's experiencing abuse or has experienced abuse is to get educated, because research has shown time and time again that people who experienced abuse at one point in their life, they're more likely to fall into kind of this cycle of abuse. And at no fault of their own, it's just the fact that that's their norm. They're so used to kind of being in those situations that becomes kind of familiar. It's their comfort zone. And I truly believe the only way to break out of that cycle is to learn about what abuse truly is.
Yeah.
Learn what are those tactics that abusers are using. Learn about how you can put safe boundaries in place for you, how you can protect yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, if that's something that you do believe. I think it all comes down to education, if I'm honest with you. I actually read a book of a really good friend of mine called Kenzie, which was called, I think it's called Abuse 101. And something like that I would recommend to everyone who's going through something like this, because it's a very simple guide of, this is what abuse looks like. This is the tactics abusers use. And this is how you can start your healing journey. And I think until you know the foundation of what's going on, any healing you do will quite easily be unraveled by the tactics abusers use, because you won't know that's what they're doing. Love bombing, gaslighting. If you don't know that's what it is, you will kind of fall back into that trap of abuse very easily. So I would definitely say the key thing is get yourself educated, make yourself feel safe in whatever situation you're in and your circumstances, and then absolutely reach out to those supportive networks, because those supportive networks, those supportive people, I think, are the ones that just keep you grounded. And you definitely need that when you're in an abusive
Yes.
situation or you've just left something very traumatic. You need someone to ground you. So I would definitely recommend those two things. Education, absolutely do. And then find your support group, find your family, find the people who make you feel like you're at home, and they will definitely help you get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So for the people of the women that might not be familiar with this word, can you explain what is like these two things, right? That you are really important. You mentioned getting educated, understanding what is abusive and what is not abusive, and also getting grounded for being able to start to traverse all this pain, right?
Yeah. So education, I think, sounds like a scary word for a lot of people because it can feel a little bit overwhelming, especially if that's like if academics, for example, is not something you ever felt comfortable in. But education can simply be watching videos about what a healthy relationship looks like. And when I say videos, I'm not talking about things that are just on YouTube. I'm talking about things that have been released by actual domestic violence agencies, like, so in the UK where I'm from, we've got our, I guess, umbrella organization for domestic violence is Women's Aid, and Women's Aid on their website have a huge amount of resources in numerous languages on this is what abuse looks like. This is what control and coercion look like, because that again is very difficult to spot. Um, this is what gaslighting is. And when you've kind of explored that and I guess you've started answering the questions whilst you've watched them to think, hold on, this is something that I'm also going through. You're then in the same right place to then reach out for that support because they are the people who are the specialists. They are the people who are not going to victim blame. They're not going to make you feel worse about your situation. They're going to believe you. They're going to listen to you. They're going to tell you it's not your fault what you're going through because that is the truth. It's never your fault if you're experiencing abuse. They're the people who are going to really hammer home those messages that you need to hear at that moment to begin that journey of healing. And then they are the same people who can then support you to access actual therapeutic services if that's something you're ready to do. So I would always recommend when I talk about education, look at the specialist services of where you are based on the abuse that you've experienced because they will always have some kind of resource available. That's what they're there for. They're for survivors. They've made them specifically for survivors. It's very easy to type things on like YouTube or on Instagram and fall into the wrong type of messaging. And it could either further make you feel like you should be putting up with this situation, or it might make you feel like it's not a big deal, or it will victim blame, or it would re traumatize you. It's dangerous going to places where they're not the experts. So go to the experts. And when it comes to healing, again, reach out to those people who are there to do that exact thing. And I know for some people, especially in my community, which is the Pakistani community, there's a lot of taboo around reaching out and telling others of what's going on in your life. And if that's something you don't feel comfortable and safe doing, don't do it. Reach out to the people who are safe in your life. If that's a friend, a neighbor, a mom that you meet on the school run, whoever that might be, reach out to those people because the biggest thing I find for survivors, the hardest thing that they ever have to go through is making that first step and asking for help. It's such a difficult thing, but once you have done it, it makes the world of difference. And when you've done it with the right person and the right people, you will see the difference in your own life. You'll see how much things have changed, and you'll see that actually your life doesn't have to remain this way. There is a way out. There's a way out for you, for your children, if you have children. There's places you can go for safety. There's so much available now. Not enough still, but there's so much available now for survivors of abuse. So I would definitely always recommend reaching out to the specialists because they know what they're doing. They're there for a reason and they will help you absolutely get through whatever it is you're going through.
Thanks. And so you mentioned the aspect of going to experts, right? And finding those that are specialized in this. And also, I would like to you to ask you, which are some hints, some symptoms, some feelings, or that women can already start feeling that could be hints, right? Like that make them able to understand that, okay, this relationship is not actually healthy. Because I can understand when it's so natural. We believe that it's normal.
You're absolutely right. It becomes your normal, and it becomes your comfort zone because you're so used to it. And in terms of, I guess, tips or hints, things to be aware of is, firstly, there's many different types of abuse, which I think many people don't know. I think we're more aware of physical abuse, sexual abuse, but things like financial abuse, control and coercion, something that I talk about a lot, honor-based violence, forced marriage, these are not understood enough. But I think the bottom line really comes down to, if you are feeling like you have to walk on eggshells around this person, they come home and instantly you have this kind of dread in your heart of, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know how they're going to react. If you feel like you can't get support from them, which I think many people fail to see as abusive, is if you're in a marriage and if you've got children, for example, and you are the person who is kind of the only parent and this person is doing nothing to support you, that's not a safe relationship. That's not a kind relationship. That's emotionally very abusive. Um, so if they make you feel like you can't ask for help, or you have asked for help and it's kind of turned into quite a big consequence, maybe it's turned into a huge argument, maybe they've been quite violent, maybe they belittle you and make you feel like you're not good enough and you can't do your role, things like that will definitely be something that I would say kind of take into consideration. A lot of it is your emotions. If something is telling you that this doesn't feel right or this is off, then it probably is. If you can't openly have a conversation about your partner or your family with others outside of your home because you feel that they may, it may feel a little bit uncomfortable, it may feel a little bit embarrassing, maybe, there's a reason for that. Maybe because you know that the behavior they're displaying isn't okay, and somebody else will tell you that. So if it doesn't feel like a safe space, it's probably because it isn't. And one thing to pick up on is, if you have children and your children's behavior changes around this person, if they become withdrawn, if they maybe get aggressive, they get angry, they get violent, um, if your children don't feel happy around this person, there's definitely a reason for it. Because there's so much that you can tolerate and there's so much children can tolerate. Um, but children will put up with so much, and then they will start to display the fact that they feel unsafe and they feel unhappy. And that could itself be a huge hint to you that something isn't right, something is off, because my child's behavior is different to how they normally would be, maybe with yourself. So I think listen to your body. When I was in teaching children primary schools, I would always say, look out for your early warning signs. Your jelly legs, your sweaty palms, your heart palpitations. Look out for what your body's telling you. If you don't feel safe, there is a reason for that. The person is potentially a reason for that. And also look out for how they make you feel within your mind and within your heart. If you don't feel happy with this person, if this person, you feel like they ridicule you, if you feel like you can't make a decision on your own, if you feel like if you feel like you go out but you're going to be surveillanced, and you're going to be kind of the feeling of you'd rather just stay in than go out because it's not worth the hassle, kind of pick up on all those things. And I think the only way people will pick up on those hints is if they learn about what a controlling and coercive relationship looks like and what emotional abuse looks like, and then start to recognize the terminology that people use, like love bombing and gaslighting. Well, what is that? What does it look like? Because I think once you read it and you understand it, that's when the light bulb kind of turns on and you realize, hold on, that sounds a bit too familiar. So I think it's definitely read into them. There's a lot of stuff available. Look at the experts. Don't go to people who are just kind of giving their opinion. Look at the people who are experts in this field because they're going to give you the correct information.
Thank you. So now going more into what's the approach that you're providing, right? You mentioned at the beginning that you support professionals in this journey to support people, women who have been suffer from abuse, right? What would you say is your approach? Tell us a little bit more about this.
So after working with survivors for such a long time, I think I realized that there's so much impact that one person can make. And I kind of shifted myself to working with professionals and training professionals because I thought, well, the more professionals that know how to work in a culturally competent way, the better it is for the people that I was trying to support in the first place. Sometimes we have to recognize there's so much we can do, and maybe our expertise need to be held somewhere else. So what I do now myself is using that decade of knowledge that I've built up working at rape crisis, working with Women's Aid, just supporting people personally. I've created a mentorship program for professionals who work specifically with survivors. So therapists, healers, psychiatrists, psychologists, anyone who's got a space where they have direct contact with survivors of abuse quite regularly. And the mentorship it's a one-on-one with myself for 6 months, but for however long you need it. The idea is you could achieve it in 6 months, but life happens. You may need more time. That's fine. Um, but it's a one-on-one mentorship with myself to really understand the deep-rooted issues within cultural communities. Because again, going back to the education side, we cannot support survivors of ethnic minority abuse properly without actually understanding what those survivors and their communities look like, because their upbringing, their understanding of abuse, their experiences are so different to people who are not from those backgrounds. And things like honor, for example, it's a very different concept in ethnic minority communities. It's a very dangerous concept when it's manipulated. And if you, as a professional, don't understand that, you would either have a survivor in front of you who will recognize you don't understand them, you don't get them, I'm not going to get what I need out of this session. You're going to have a survivor who's either sitting there educating you and having to explain their entire kind of family history, which they shouldn't have to be doing. Or you're going to have a survivor who just says, nope, I'm not going to go to this person because they're not going to get me. So in each scenario, you're going to not provide a service that you should be providing to these survivors. So my mentorship is really getting down to the deep-rooted issues within these communities. I go into detail about harmful practices that are practiced within these communities, harmful abuses, so things like honor-based violence and honor-based killings, forced marriage, female genital mutilation, dowry abuse, ritual abuse, spiritual abuse, and then also helping professionals look at domestic abuse through the lens of someone from a cultural community, because their experiences of domestic abuse will be very different to someone who's not from that background. Because sometimes in ethnic minority communities, there's multiple perpetrators. Safety is heightened, the risk of being killed is heightened because honor now plays a part in what's going on. People could be taken abroad and you lose them. You can't find them in the system anymore. So there's lots of additional things that need to be considered when working with those communities. So that's kind of the main chunk of my work. But I also provide bespoke training to professionals. So if they want to train up their staff, for example, on a certain topic. So if they want to talk to their staff maybe more about honor-based violence, or they want to talk about female genital mutilation, I can run these one-off training workshops for them, again, to get them educated, get them upskilled, get them confident, get them to a place where they can support survivors without feeling like they can't challenge what's going on, and without feeling like they're going to be discriminatory or racist, because I think that's a big fear. A lot of professionals don't want to ask the questions because they don't want to offend people. And I just think they just don't know how to ask the questions without causing offense, but still asking it so you can support survivors properly. So that is kind of what I do now. And I think it's making a different type of an impact, because the more professionals we support to understand, that's way more survivors that are getting the right form of support. And sometimes I get professionals kind of say to me, "Oh, well, I don't really need this because I don't have ethnic minority survivors come to me." And my question is, well, is it because for an ethnic minority survivor, you can't support them? You, the barrier in itself, they look at you and think, you don't know enough. And actually, the reason you don't have people coming to you is because you aren't trained up. You don't know what you need to be doing. We live in a very diverse world now. We're not pockets of communities anymore. We're very mixed. We're very together. We're very interlinked. And as a therapist, you will definitely come across someone from a background, and if you don't know enough about it, you are going to do that person a disservice, and that's the truth. And we know from statistics, it takes a woman from a non-cultural background 7 times to reach out for support. It takes a woman from ethnic minority background 13 times. And if they've reached out to you and you haven't given them what they need, or you can't show them that you understand them, you are going to stop. You're going to be the reason they probably don't ever reach out again. 13 times is long. It's a lot. It's a lot of times people reach out. So if someone's come to you and they're telling you, like I said before, asking for help is the hardest thing. If someone is coming to you and asking you for help and you're not prepared, imagine the damage that's going to do then for that survivor.
And you mentioned the mentorship, and you mentioned also the workshop. So as to the workshop, do you usually work with a specific audience, or like from specific areas of the industry, or you're open?
So to be honest, with both my programs, I'm very much open to anyone, because the way I see it is, you've made contact with me because you feel like it will be beneficial, and it's beneficial because you are working with survivors in some capacity. Even if you're not working in like the violence against women and girls industry, you might be someone who works in a school, for example. You might be someone who works with mothers, through parent coaching and things like that. And then you're finding, hold on a second, I'm seeing a pattern now, and trauma seems to be coming up, and abuse seems to be coming up, and I don't know how to manage this. I'm there, honestly, for anyone and everyone who wants it, because I don't feel like abuse sits in pockets. It's spread across our community, unfortunately, and it's something that never discriminates. It's something that can affect anyone at any time in their life. And you, as a professional, regardless of whether you're in the industry or not, could come across a survivor. I've when I used to work previously for the Rape Crisis Centre, I used to train police officers and healthcare workers, and I used to train up people who manage children homes, because although that wasn't your main chunk of work, you are coming across abuse, and their work doesn't necessarily touch on abuse to a level that they need it, but they were finding they were having this pattern. They were having the same kind of people come in with the same kind of problems, and they just didn't know how to handle it. And I think it's better to get yourselves prepared now, especially if you're finding a pattern like that within your organizations. Get prepared now before you get to a point where you're going to have too many survivors who are coming to you and you don't know how to handle it, and you are sending people away. I think that's the worst thing you can do to a survivor, is they reach out for help and you say to them, sorry, I can't do anything for you. So I think, yeah, I help anyone and everybody who's open for it. Anybody who wants to learn, I will absolutely be there to support you through it.
Which are the misunderstandings or the gaps that you have found so far? That some of them that you would like to share to the people, so, and also to the whole audience, right? Going through all this education and teaching people, which are some of these gaps, misunderstanding that you found in the people that they didn't know about abuse?
So in terms of ethnic minority abuse or just abuse in general?
In how to deal with people that have been through abuse.
Okay. So I think one of the biggest gaps is terminology. So I find therapists sometimes so they know enough about abuse and they know enough about trauma, but when they fall into talking to someone from, like, for example, an ethnic minority background, and they start using words like arranged marriage, for example, I have noticed therapists don't, or professionals in general, don't understand what those words mean. And they use their own cultural biases of what they think they mean. And they actually end up misguiding and misinforming the survivor. So I've had many people that I've spoken to, survivors, for example, who've experienced an arranged marriage where there was consent and they were happy and it was just something that was put together by family members. Talk to professionals about it. The professional has labelled it as forced marriage, which is the complete opposite. The forced marriage is where there's no consent. It was done without their will. It was an abusive situation. And I've had survivors come to me and say, I don't feel happy with my counsellor because my counsellor is not understanding what I'm saying, or my counselor is trying to tell me that my family forced me into a marriage when they didn't, or they're trying to paint my family as abusers when they're not. So I think terminology is a very big one. Not understanding what survivors are talking about and then using your own biases to assume that you understand what they're saying. That's very dangerous, I think. Also, something that I find a lot is this misunderstanding of culture and religion. So I've had to have conversations with counselors before where they've said to me, oh, I can't talk about that because it's part of their religion, isn't it? Like, I can't offend them. I can't have that conversation. And I've had to sit there and bring up scriptures and show it to them and say, this is not in their faith. They might tell you it's something that's in their faith because that's what they've been told to believe, and that's their norm. That's how abusers have justified what they've done. But you, as a professional, for example, female genital mutilation, a huge myth around it is it's an Islamic and Christian practice. It's not. Neither of those faith backgrounds say it's okay. Neither of those faith backgrounds even talk about it being a practice that was ever used. But then therapists are kind of sitting there and justifying the actions based on faith, when actually what you need to be saying is, this is harmful, this is not okay, this is abuse, and you should never have gone through it. And I'm sorry that the people in your family misled you and told you that you should have experienced it because of X, Y, and Z, and should be doing their jobs as therapists, guiding this person and making them understand that you should never have had to experience it, rather than, oh, it was a religious practice. I don't know enough about it, but I'm sure your family had the best interest at heart. No, that's the wrong messaging. So I think that again is another big gap that I'm finding, is that there's a gap in knowledge with religion. There's definitely a gap in knowledge with terminology. There is a lot of people's own biases. I think, like, professionals, therapists, healers, they mean well. They're trying to do their job, but they're still human. And those biases do come out. And I think sometimes they don't check themselves and they don't stop themselves. And I've had survivors, unfortunately, who I've referred to therapists in the organizations I've worked in, who've said, I'm not happy with them. And I feel discriminated and I feel judged and I feel like they're doing more harm than good. And then I've had to go and educate these counselors and say to them, what are you playing at? You've been doing this for 20 years as a therapist. Like, we've done multiple training on this. Well, why are you saying the wrong? And it is because of the biases. It's something that I think you just need to do more work on, and you need to be aware of, and you need to be aware of the moment where you check in with yourself and you pause and you stop and you use your own techniques that you're teaching your survivors on yourself. You ground yourself, you think to yourself, hold on a second, is this going to be supportive? Is this something that's useful for me to say right now? And if it's not, maybe don't say it, and then check in with an expert later and have that conversation of how you can approach it. And then later go back and speak to that survivor in your next session and explore it in a sensitive and culturally competent way. And I think those a lot are generally the gaps I'm finding is people are just not understanding it enough. And some of it is the reason because they don't want to. They don't put the time and energy into learning about it. Some of it, unfortunately, is ignorance of, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what I'm doing, which is fair. There's an expertise there. There's a lot of knowledge there, but things change. Communities change. Cultures come in and out. And unfortunately, these harmful practices that you may never have been exposed to before may then come to your doorstep because now those communities are migrating into the areas you're working in. So I genuinely feel like it's professionals need to be aware of where they're going wrong, put the ego and the pride aside. You're there for a survivor, you're there to provide a service, and just try and do that to the best. And asking for support and professionally developing yourself is not a negative. That's how you show up for survivors. That's how you show survivors that you are doing your job to support them to the best of your ability. So I think don't find shame in needing to reach out for support and educating yourself. That's actually a real positive thing. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of reframing that needs to be done, I think, with professionals. Hopefully more of us can kind of work together to do that for people.
Yes, yes. And you mentioned that that's a really important thing as well there, which is understanding, right? This is what it's coming up for me now again. It's like understanding that it cannot be understood if you haven't been through the same specific situation, right? But for those who haven't experienced it, I feel that it's good to say this, right? There is so much pain inside. What it is needed is a really safe space, a containment where you can feel understood, validated, and seen, and gradually go through all this pain, right? So the focus should be there, right? It's like we are human beings. Of course, we will evolve and gain more tools and get educated. And again, when it comes to this service, putting the focus there is, right, what does this person, this woman needs at this moment, right?
Absolutely. It's definitely all about being survivor centered, I think. There's a buzzword that a lot of people use saying I'm trauma informed, which is great, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Like you said, survivors need to be at the center of it, and we need to be more competent in how we provide our support, whether that be culturally, religiously. There's so many different barriers that people experience because of their circumstances. I used to provide workshops to a college for youngsters with learning difficulties and physical disabilities. And that in itself, again, there's a lot of reframing you need to do. The way you would support a survivor with a disability, the way you would support a survivor who's from the LGBT plus community, all of these things are different, and I think it's just being mindful that, like you said, that survivor needs to be the forefront. What is this person's needs? And if you're not able to offer them what they need, go and get educated so you can, because there is so much specialist services out there now. There's specialist training out there to support survivors from all forms of backgrounds. It's there for a reason. So use that so then you can put that survivor at the forefront and they're not having to just share small parts of their lives because they know you won't understand their entire identity. You know, they should be able to turn up to their session, like you said, feeling safe, feeling heard, and feeling like the entire person, the entire part of their identity is understood by the person sitting in front of them. Whether they agree with it or not, the fact that they just feel seen and heard in that room is so important, so crucial. So I would definitely urge professionals, look at what your survivors need, and if you don't have that, if you don't have the expertise in that, go and find it, whether it is culture, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, whatever it is. Go and get clued up on it so you can be the best person for the person who's coming to you for support.
Would you have anything else that you would love to say, whether to women who have been through abusive situations or to professionals before wrapping up?
I think my message to survivors who are either going through it or have got out of it, I would say to them that what you're going through is not something that you deserve. It's not your fault for what's happening, and there is a better life out there for you. And I would urge you to reach out to the people who are going to make you feel safe and seen and heard, and will listen to your story and will help you and guide you through a journey of healing and safety based on what you want, based on what you feel comfortable with. So I'm a huge advocate of going to organizations who are experts because I worked in those organizations. I see the difference they make for women. I see women come in and feeling so deflated and feeling like they're broken, and then coming out years later and feeling like, they're a whole new person with this whole new life, whole new perspective. And there is a new life out there for you. You don't have to put up with this forever. This isn't your forever. And I would just urge you to pick up the phone and speak to somebody, whether it be a helpline, whether it be messaging a forum, whether it be talking to a friend. Reach out and ask for help, and keep asking for help until you get the help that you want and you need and you deserve. Because this life isn't the life that you should have to put up with. And professionals, I would say that you are literally the lifeline for so many survivors. They are relying on you to help them navigate this really messy, really scary time in their lives. And they need you to be at your best. And if you know yourself that you haven't got enough, or you need to do more, reach out to the places that can give you that additional support and guidance. Just because you're professional doesn't mean that you are expected to know everything. You know, there are going to be gaps in your knowledge. That's completely normal. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's nothing to be embarrassed about. The best thing you can do for yourself and for the survivors that you're working with is to upskill yourself so you know you can support them with confidence, and you know you are the best person that they could possibly need in that moment in time, because it's very difficult for a survivor to reach out for support. And if they've reached out and you're not giving them the service they need, they may never reach out to anybody ever again. You might be their only chance. So see it as that, use it as that, and definitely get yourself skilled up to a level that you need to be for the women or the survivors that you're working with.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I honor you again for your story, for what you have been through, and for speaking up for many, many people that have been through the same, and for providing this huge value to the world. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much for your kind words. Honestly, they mean so much to me. Thank you.